I've always had a good relationship with my mother-in-law up until I was pregnant. My husband's side of the family hasn't had a girl born in the past 100 years. So when everyone found out I was pregnant with a girl, no one believed me. Everyone was so shocked when it was announced that most of them denied it up until the moment she was born. And that's when the horrible comments started. Whenever my husband wasn't around, my mother-in-law would make snarky comments like, "I wonder where she got that nose. It's definitely not my son's." I never told him and let everything slide because she's older and she's my mother-in-law. But when I was pregnant with baby number 2, and yes, it was another girl, I told him to wait as long as possible because I know she wouldn't like the news. When she found out it was a girl, she started sobbing and screaming. She was calling me a whore and demanded that I get out of her house. "Those girls are not ours. She's a whore, a slut. My son did not make those girls." She looked at me and said, "I let you get away with it the first time. I took you in as family. I allowed my son to believe he fathered that brat, but I will not allow it again." My husband was yelling at his mom, and I got up and took my daughter and I ran to the car sobbing. We decide to go no contact with my mother-in-law for the rest of my pregnancy. Until she decides to apologize for what she's done, we don't want to speak to her. A few weeks before my due date, my mother-in-law reaches out to my husband and says he misses her and my daughter. So he asked if we can go have dinner to try to mend the relationship. I said okay, but I didn't feel comfortable bringing my daughter, so I left her to my sister. At dinner, my husband asked his mom if she's ready to apologize. She said she's ready, but as soon as she gets the paternity test result, because my husband cannot be the father, and the fact that we have 2 girls is ridiculous. I proceed to grab my things because I'm not listening to this, when she grabs me and slaps me as hard as she can across the face. She calls me an effing whore and says I need to own up to my problems. I push her away, trying to get to the door as fast as possible when she throws a snow globe at my head. I fall to the ground, and that's when she starts kicking me. In my belly. My husband pushes her off of me and she breaks 2 fingers, but takes me to the hospital where I receive 6 stitches. She then tried to press charges against my husband, saying he assaulted her, but the hospital had more than enough proof to put her in jail. I sent her a gift in jail, the paternity results showing that her son is the father of my 2 daughters.
So this is how a prank call could lead to a shitty relationship. So this might sound immature, but one day my friend and I thought it'd be funny to make some prank calls, so we called this guy that she knew. The guy we prank called had a really good sense of humor about it, so he decided to keep messaging me after. I really just wanted attention and decided to keep talking to him. And then that's when we FaceTimed. He was so cute and we continued to talk back and forth. But I had to go on vacation with my family for a few days, so we couldn't meet up quite yet. For this trip, he asked me to be his girlfriend, and I said yes, but it wasn't long until he started to notice that I wasn't much of a simp for him. This really bothered him, but he ended up going about it all the wrong way. He decided to start making up stories in order to get attention from me. They would be about him or his family, and he would just do it to get me to listen to him more. And me being a dumbass just kind of ignored this red flag and continued on in the relationship. So one day he sent me a message saying some guys had beat him up, even though in a previous picture he showed me he didn't have any bruises. 3 days later, when I was outside of a club, he messaged me that he had a brain bleed which led to a stroke and now he has permanent brain damage. Like for part 2. Part 2, a prank call might lead you to a shitty relationship. I literally stormed out of the club crying my eyes out. Straight up thought my boyfriend had severe brain damage. He told me this was a condition that he was going to have to spend the rest of his life with, and I cried until the morning. Once it got to the next day though, I kind of noticed that he was talking normally, he wasn't in the hospital, so I got really sus about it. So I decided to go ahead and text his mom through my mom's phone, just to check in and see how he was doing from her perspective. And she was like, "Oh, he's fine, it was just a little scare." A little scare? Brain damage is a little scare? He was like, "In fact, he's out biking right now." So I just stormed out to go dig some more information. I found out he messaged my best friend telling her not to tell any of his friends about his seizure. So I decided to confront him and called him fuming. And at first he denied everything. He was like, "No, it's all true." So I told him I needed a break, and that's when he was like, wait. I Googled some of the symptoms that I was having, and that's what showed up. So you use Dr. Google. I just broke it off with him. If you guys have a story you'd like to share, follow me and DM me on Insta.
Story time. My boyfriend found out that I had an OnlyFans. So my boyfriend and I have been together for probably 2 years. And I had just turned 18 and we decided that we were going to move in together. We both worked full-time jobs. I was a waitress, he worked at Walmart. And the restaurant that I worked at was literally a 2-minute walk from Walmart. And I was forced to get a job there by my boyfriend because he had super bad trust issues. I know you guys are going to be like, "Oh, well, I can see why." No. It was because of this rumor that went around right before we graduated that me and his best friend made out at a party. Child, anyways, back to the story. So then COVID hit. And it got to the point where him and I couldn't pay our bills or anything like that. So he got a job working for his uncle. And I went on unemployment, but it still wasn't helping. But my best friend was a stripper. And she told me that she had an OnlyFans account and that she was making really good money off of it. So since I was home every day doing absolutely nothing, I decided that I would make an OnlyFans account. And I didn't tell my boyfriend about it, like for part 2. Part 2 about how my boyfriend found out that I had an OnlyFans. So like I said, I made the OnlyFans and I didn't tell him about it. And I was only putting stuff on there like twice a week. But then my friend promoted me and I started making a lot more money. But then I started putting stuff on there every time that my boyfriend would go to work. So a month goes by and my boyfriend realizes that I have way more money than I did before. And he keeps asking me about it, but I tell him don't worry about it. Which definitely seemed really sus. Anyways, the one day while he's at work, I'm taking some pics for my OF. And I'm blasting my music. And I turn around and lo and behold, who do you think was standing in the doorway? My boyfriend. And he has his phone out and he's recording me. So then he started explaining to me that because since I gave him such bad trust issues and I wouldn't tell him where I was getting the extra money, he set up cameras in the house. And he's been watching me for 2 weeks straight. And he's still recording on his phone at this time. So we broke up and now there's a video of me half naked on YouTube and him exposing me.
Storytime on how I got kidnapped by my ex-boyfriend. And today I'm not going to do any lip syncing, and this is not my story. So I was 16 at the time, he was 19. He lived with his grandmother and I was only allowed to go over when she was at work or out of town. And we were very toxic. We were always on and off and he used to hit me. He used to throw me around, and guys, I'm 5'5", and he was literally a foot taller than me. So one day, we were broken up at the time. I called him and told him that I needed to get my stuff from his grandmother's house. I left my backpack and a few other things there because I was serious about breaking up with him. So he told me to go at 5 because at that time his grandmother wouldn't be there. She's a nurse, so she works doubles. Also, he told me he wanted to, talk to break up on a good note. And me being naive and young, I believed him. And I really needed my backpack for college. So I had my friend drop me off in my car. I'm running out of time, so come back for part 2. Okay, so part 2 on how I got kidnapped by my ex-boyfriend. So I told my friend to drop me off in my own car because I was afraid he would take my car keys like he's done before. So I got there and he was acting super strange. He started telling me that my clothes were upstairs, but he still ended up going upstairs and getting them. And I was actively texting someone and he got really mad, and that's when it all started. So he threw the backpack at me and took my phone away. I tried to open the door, but he overpowered me and he blocked the door. I yelled at him to let me go and he wouldn't. He demanded for me to talk with him. He grabbed me, threw me on the couch, demanding to talk to me. I said, about what? And he was asking me why I wanted to leave him. But I refused to talk because I was pissed off. And that angered him, and he said I wasn't going to leave until I told him why I wanted to break up with him. So I told him some bum-ass story on how I wanted to focus on school. Come back for part 3. Part 3 on how I got kidnapped by my ex-boyfriend. And I told him that we could get back together after the semester was over. And I think he saw through my bullshit because he punched me. I tried to fight him back, but honestly, what could I do to him? So after that, I just sat there thinking of how I was going to get out of this. And he turned on the TV and told me that I was with him for the night. And I knew his grandmother would not get off till 5 a.m. So I ended up waiting until he relaxed and I went to the bathroom. And on my way there, I noticed a cordless house phone. And he waited for me to get out of the bathroom and then escorted me to the living room. I asked him to make us some food, and then while he was doing that, he told me that if he couldn't have me, no one can. I ended up calling 911 and kept on talking to him about the kidnap, assuming the operator would be listening to me. Long story short, the cops came, they threw him on the floor. I ended up leaving, never pressed charges, blocked him from everywhere, and now I have 3 beautiful kids and I'm married, far away from him.
Story time about how I found out who my real mom was. So long story short, I was given up for adoption because my real mom was into drugs. She signed me away as soon as I was born and boom, I was in a new family. I was 15 at this time, so I was a sophomore in high school and everything was pretty cool. My parents who adopted me always told me whenever I got to a certain age, I could go talk to my real mom if I wanted to. But at 15 years old, I wasn't allowed to. So one day we got this brand new teacher and her name was Mrs. Green. And it was funny because my birth last name is Green. It's a common name, so no, it didn't stand out to me. I soon became the teacher's favorite. I was always smart in all of my classes, so this was no surprise to me. But what surprised me was when she started saying how beautiful and smart I was and how she knew I would go far in life. So some time later, after having this new teacher, I started to tell my parents about her. As soon as I told them that her name was Mrs. Green, they instantly got chills. They tried not to make a big deal out of it, but life for part 2. This is part 2 about how I found out who my real mom was. So, like I said in part 1, my parents were definitely alarmed because they already know everything about my real mom. But I guess they didn't want to alert me, so they let everything go by. So the next day at school, my teacher, Mrs. Green, pulls me aside and says, I have to talk to you. So she says, honey, you're so smart. Your parents must be so proud of you. So she then goes, do you mind if I speak with your parents, Mr. and Mrs. Green? Do you think we could sit down for a second? And I go, sure, but that's not their last names. She says, why not? And I go, oh, I'm adopted. She then says, do you know who your real parents are? I'm like, no, I only know a couple things about them. Why? She says, I have to tell you something. I'm your mother. In my head, I was like, what in God's name? How are you here? I'm like, how are you my real mom? How are you my teacher? Wait, what is going on here? So she says, I'd really like for all 4 of us to please sit down and talk something out. Like for part 3. Part 3 story time about how I found out who my real mom was. So like I said in part 2, my teacher was desperate to sit down with all 4 of us to talk something out. So I frantically say, yeah, sure, okay. So as I head home, and I mean I am speeding home, I tell my parents everything that happened. They then told me, oh yeah, she's been trying to get in contact with you. We just never told you. We were going to wait until you got older. Apparently, she's been watching my every move because she went sober and wanted to get back in contact with me. So as my parents are telling me that it's not safe to be around her and we should just move schools, I'm like, she is my birth mother and I'd like to see where she's coming from. So after talking it out for a while, they agreed that we could sit down and talk to her about it. So once we sat down and talked everything out, we decided that I would see her once a week. So one week I went over to her house and she said, hey, let's take a trip somewhere. I wasn't comfortable doing that, but she said we were just going to go to the store. Once I got in the car, we were driving for over an hour. She pulled over and tried to give me drugs. She was never sober. I sent my mom my location. I haven't seen her